Finals week at MTSU, and I'm very excited to be through with all the assignments, all the papers I had, and excited to focus on all sports talk tonight. And I'm sure all the college students listening out there can understand where I'm coming from. It's always a huge relief, especially with graduation on the horizon. Pretty big graduating class this year for the December 2025 semester, so excited to see all of that go down. Graduation, if I'm not mistaken, is on Saturday, so congrats to all of our graduates out there, and congrats to all the students for getting through to winter break. But let's get on with the all sports talk. We're going to start with MTSU men's basketball today. Writing solo for this one, by the way, so we'll go over some different stuff. But again, Blue Raider men's basketball is where we're going to start. Their game against Belmont was this past Sunday as part of a doubleheader, along with MTSU women's basketball. Now, Blue Raider men's basketball ended up having a really high-action game against Belmont on Sunday. 83-62 was the final score. And Belmont got the win in this one, which would indicate that Belmont kind of dominated when you look at the final score, but that doesn't entirely tell the story. First things first, we have to respect Belmont and their ability overall. And I have the firm belief that they've got a lot of talent on that basketball team. They've got a lot of players who can do some special stuff, and they're going to be a problem in the Missouri Valley Conference this year. Right now, they're 9-1 on the season. They've got one loss, and it was against the Richmond Spiders. So they've been really, really special to start the year, and it was always going to be a bit of a test for MTSU taking on Belmont at home, especially with, like we mentioned, what the Bruins have already been able to do this season and what they've proved. So this was a game that, the way I see it, it wasn't so much about how you started, but how you finished, because it was pretty close overall, pretty close early on is what I was trying to say. That's not to say that MTSU didn't have good moments in the game, but overall, Belmont was able to be more consistent towards the end of the game, and that allowed them to get a bit of a separation against MTSU. Now, early on in the game, like I was mentioning, it was clear that Belmont was going to be able to keep shooting the ball well, which, again, is no surprise to anyone who's watched them, but what kept the Blue Raiders in it early on was their ability to convert from the free throw line and get drives inside the post, which is not strange for them, but they usually prioritize the three-point game, and they ended up going more to the paint early on, which I don't think is a bad strategy, especially against a team that loves to shoot it from deep like Belmont. Worked for a little bit. Torrey Alston, Chris Loof, Sean Smith, all of them had dunks early on, and it allowed MTSU to surpass Belmont in a category that they really didn't have at their disposal. At least early on, the Bruins didn't have that at their disposal. Now, many better analysts have said this before me, but basketball is a game of stretch runs and of momentum shifts. This was a simple stretch for Belmont in the second half that allowed them to kind of gap MTSU just a little bit. The Bruins shooting, which MTSU had done a pretty solid job of at least limiting to some degree early on, really came alive in the second half. And specifically, and I found this thanks to MTSU Athletics, so credit them for this data, but between 15 minutes and 9 minutes and 29 seconds to go in the second half, Belmont really started to catch fire. They went 8 for 10 on shots in that period, and the Raiders really couldn't overcome that. And that's a hard thing to come back from. When you've got an opponent that is shooting that lights out, that white hot, it's going to be hard for any team to try to combat that. And that's the danger with these teams that have the ability to shoot it from deep and shoot it from distance. If they start to get into a rhythm, if they start to get their bearings underneath them, they can quickly get a huge advantage over you, and that's kind of what happened here. MTSU did their best to get back into it, but by that point, it was basically already too late, and Belmont had built up a 20-plus point advantage. Belmont's shooting numbers were incredible in this game. They finished with a 52.3% shooting percentage from the field, 43% from the three-point line, so yeah, that kind of efficiency is going to be hard to stop for basically any team. And again, when you put up 83 points on a squad, in spite of when, where, what, why, and how, it's going to be a measure and a formula for success. Now, the surprising thing, I guess, to some degree for Blue Raider fans is that MTSU wasn't as efficient from the three-point line, barely over 20% in this game. And if you go back to the preseason and you listen to what Nick McDevitt said about this Blue Raider men's basketball team, they were going to have a heavy emphasis of getting shots off from beyond the three-point line, getting deep shots, shooting from distance in general. But that really wasn't a factor in this game, and I think without that advantage, it kind of took MTSU off their game, took them out of their zone, and they didn't quite have enough to match up with Belmont overall. And they really didn't have that guy who just exploded with a big performance. The top scorer for MTSU is Tori Alston with 14. In most of Middle's wins this season, they have a 20-plus point performance of some kind. Really didn't have that stand out in this game. Now, that's not to say the sky's falling. MTSU's 5-4 overall. The loss stings, but as Nick McDevitt, as those players on the roster will tell you, there is still plenty of time to get the ship righted. And when conference play kicks into gear in January, I think that's when we're going to see the true power, the true strength of this MTSU men's basketball team really come to fruition. That's not to say that these early games don't matter as much, but you take a little less stock in what you do early in the season, especially in basketball, compared to what you do later on in the year. We've seen teams many times get off to somewhat of a slow start, and as time goes on, they really start to build momentum, they start stacking wins, and all of a sudden, they're a completely different basketball team by the time the season comes to an end. Think about the Michigan Wolverines men's team, who, funny enough, MTSU played earlier this season. And actually, compared to a lot of other ranked teams that Michigan has played, MTSU played them pretty well. So Michigan starts off a little bit slower to the season. They're still winning, they're still competitive, but they don't quite have that spark yet. They haven't really gelled yet. But at a certain point here in December, they really started to click. And all of a sudden, they are blowing out ranked teams on what seems to be a game-to-game basis. MTSU can look at that and say, hey, not only did we compete with that talented of a team for some point in time, we have the capability to do that ourselves. So it's kind of taking the Wolverines' blueprint as far as that goes. But it's not just exclusive to Michigan. Plenty of teams have done that in the past. All you have to do is go back and look at history to find that out. Again, Middle's 5-4 overall, so they still have a winning record, and they still have plenty of opportunities to get more wins and get themselves contending for a Conference USA championship. So I'm curious to see how that'll go. And funny enough, when we next have All Sports Talk on Wednesday, it'll be right before the men's basketball game against Kennesaw State, which is going to be a big-time Conference USA showdown. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's their next game overall. So they've got a little bit of a break for finals week, but then CUSA game against Kennesaw State. So those conference games right around the corner, going to be interesting to watch for Blue Raiders men's basketball. Speaking of MTSU basketball, the women's team took on the Memphis Tigers, and shout out to them. That was the other half of the doubleheader on Sunday, and it was a really fun game, a really great performance by the Lady Raiders, one that they've kind of been searching for, I think, to some degree early on in the season, and they put things together in a big way against Memphis in this game. Now, one of the biggest differences in this game and games that the Lady Raiders have played before was their defensive success and physicality. And if you have ever watched a Rick Insell, a Matt Insell Lady Raiders basketball team, you know they're not afraid to get down in the paint and get physical. But I think here they really were able to convert that into a solid game plan and a solid game play from the Lady Raiders basketball players. And once that translated, it really started to affect Memphis and put MTSU in the groove that they were looking for. Another big difference that helped them, especially early on in this game, was their ability to get off to a fast start. And I think if you've watched MTSU a few times this season, they've fallen behind early in some of their games, but because of their inability to get things in motion early on. I remember the Tennessee game. I was there doing courtside reporting for MTSU, and they were kind of doomed early on because they didn't quite get off to the start they were looking for. And against a high-powered team like the Lady Vols, that is such a hard thing to come back from, although MTSU did do their best to try to make it happen. So I think the Lady Raiders have learned their lesson to some degree from games like that early in the season. And again, that's why you have those games, is to learn, to get better, to grow. see what the best of the best do, and then try to translate that into your own game. And I think that's exactly what the Lady Raiders have been able to do. They got off to a fast start in this game, started to gap Memphis, kind of like what we talked about with Belmont in the second half against the men's basketball team. That's what the Lady Raiders were able to do against the Tigers. Shout out to Blair Bogus and Macy Pfeiffer early on in this game. They combined for double-digit scoring and rebounding through the first quarter of this game. So they were definitely feeling it early on. The thing is that MTSU really didn't have any lulls after that either. They continued to keep up the pressure, and they started to play some big-time bully ball in that second quarter. That physicality I was talking about, this is when it really started to set in. It sounds like a football term, but really they just out-physicaled the Tigers, and that's kind of what got them in the position to win this game. Now, the defense as well really kept Memphis at bay, and when you look at the final statistics, it's really impressive to see what MTSU did. They ended up holding Memphis to 32.7 shooting, and they had an 18-point to 6-point paint advantage against the Tigers in the first half. So that shows you, for lack of a better term, those two teams were playing two different basketball games. Memphis was trying to shoot a bit more from distance because they couldn't really get anything inside, and MTSU was not afraid to go in the interior, get some drives in the post, and get some high percentage scoring looks, and it helped them out tremendously early on in this game. Yuhan Lin went for a career-high 20 points in this game. We've talked a lot about Yuhan Lin already this season, and her name always comes up when the MTSU women's basketball team is playing, and for good reason. She has had very solid games this year, and I think this is one where she really put a lot of the pieces together. Still some room to grow, obviously, and that can be said for anybody on the Lady Raiders roster, but Yuhan Lin really did a good job of putting it together in this game. Career-high 20 points. Blair Bogus continuing to show out, 19 points in this contest, and by the way, Blair Bogus also, for the third time this season, gets the CUSA Freshman of the Week honors, and she had 40 total points this week, 14 for 25 from the field. Now, it sounds cliche to say, but here's the thing with Blair Bogus. She's young, she's learning a lot about how to play college basketball, she's learning a lot about herself. I mean, you think back to if you're kind of somebody who's been away from the college game for a few years, or maybe you're a bit older than I am and some of the college basketball players are. If you've been away from the game for a while, think about when you were that young, when you were in that state of mind. You were still learning a lot about how to play basketball, how to get your bearings, how to compete against some really tough elite competition, and that's what Blair's doing, and she's learning and learning really fast. She is a very quick learner, and she has put herself in a position to become, I think, a superstar for MTSU women's basketball. And when you think about the Lady Raiders, they have an incredible tradition, an incredible history when it comes to superstars and success. You think back to Savannah Wheeler, Courtney Whitson, some of those players, Bolda Reva, when she was around. Those are the players that come off the top of the head for me, because those were the players that got the team, obviously, to the NCAA tournament, took on LSU, took on Louisville. But I think Blair Bogus has the potential to be at that level, especially as she gets older, as she learns more about her game, gets more skills under her belt, and learns from Coach Insel. I think she's going to be a really, really solid player to have. And, of course, Macy Pfeiffer, ended up with 9 points as well in this game. So the Lady Raiders put a lot of things together that they didn't have before. They go on to win this game by double digits against Memphis. I think the biggest question mark that you have to think about with the Lady Raiders, now that they've got this win and looking ahead to the rest of their season, which, by the way, their next game is on Sunday against, if I'm not mistaken, Southern Indiana. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's Southern Indiana, and it's on the road. Next time they'll be at home. We'll get to that in a second, but it's a really, really big contest. I think the biggest question, though, with the Lady Raiders is, can they cut back on the turnovers? It's been one of their biggest handicaps this season, and they had 27 of them against Memphis. Now, that didn't cost them this game, but when you talk about 27 turnovers, it is a lot to have in a singular game, and it's something that MTSU is going to have to try to avoid as time goes on, because it has cost them games before. You could argue it cost them some games back in November, and it didn't cost them this game against Memphis, but if you do that against other opponents, say in Conference USA, it might not go as well. So I think the Lady Raiders are learning more. They're putting pieces together, but That is the one thing that they've got to see if they can work out, try to get that out of their system, because it is early and there is plenty of time to correct it, but that could be a big negative, especially when it comes CUSA tournament time. I'm a believer that as you get further on in the season, and really as you get into the postseason, your faults and the negative stuff about your basketball team will shine through and get exposed. So, the Lady Raiders have to find a way to cut back on turnovers, but I think they can. I think they will. You got Coach Rick and Matt Insel. I think both of them are going to do a good job of sorting that out for the Lady Raiders, so I have no doubt about that. But needless to say, it is going to be something that they'll need to work through the rest of the season, but still a really solid win against Memphis on Sunday. And they've got a big test coming up on Tuesday next week. At home Tuesday night, Lady Raiders take on Auburn. So for the second time this season, a SEC women's basketball team coming to Murfreesboro to take on the MTSU Lady Raiders. And if I'm not mistaken, tip-off time is 6:30, so that should be a really fun test for MTSU. And you can bet, much like the University of Tennessee game, Murphy Center, the Glass House, will be rocking. So cannot wait to see that one. That will be, by the way, right here on WGNS. We're not done here on All Sports Talk. We got a lot more to go over. When we come back, we'll recap Oakland's historic Class 6A state championship victory against Ravenwood, and we'll go over some news for the MTSU football coaching staff. All that and more coming up right after this on All Sports Talk.
This is Chip Walters, and I'm honored to be your 2024 MTAR Realtor of the Year. I'm with Exit Realty Bob Lamb & Associates, and like many of you, I've seen the real estate market shift and change. People often ask, Chip, what's really going on? Well, that's a great question, and I believe in answering with solid, factual data. So let's cut through some of the noise. I invite you to reach out. Let's have a conversation about your real estate goals and the current market trends in your neighborhood. You can find all my contact information at choosechip.net.
WGNS.
This is Peter Demas, and here is this week's Demas's Emergency Responder of the Week.
Murfreesboro police officer and SRO Cole Glass was on a bike patrol when he noticed a child struggling with a broken bike chain. The boy, visibly frustrated, told Glass the chain came off. Without hesitation, Glass knelt and fixed it, and the moment became a small but powerful reminder of the heart behind the badge. Murfreesboro police officer Cole Glass's response exemplifies the kind of everyday heroism that often goes unnoticed. A willingness to pause, engage, and uplift a neighbor in need.
When you see a firefighter, police officer, paramedic, or telecommunicator going the extra mile, let WGNS know, and we at Demas's Restaurant will salute them as the Emergency Responder of the Week.
This is Wade Hayes from Toots Restaurants, and our family is just honored and blessed to be part of this community for 40 years.
Hi, this is Nick Hayes with Toots Restaurants. After 40 years, we still got them. $6.99 daily lunch specials. Stop by Toots.com and check them out.
Thank you for dining with us since 1985.
Thank you, Rutherford County.
Thank you for dining with us for 40 years.
Good food and fun. Toots. Good food and fun.
Coming into a sizable amount of money is one kind of surprise. But a rough Tennessee winter is another one. Folks in this area know the importance of having their HVAC checkup before winter hits. People also know the importance of Roscoe Brown checking their plumbing system too. Frozen pipes, broken water heaters, just a few of the problems from Old Man Winter. Set up a winter plumbing and HVAC checkup at Roscoe Brown.
Roscoe Brown.
RoscoeBrown.com. Sign-ups are going on right now for First Shot's Winter Basketball League in Rutherford County. Coach Andy Herzer guides kids to sharpen basketball skills and build teamwork through exciting clinics and games. Since 2003, First Shot has empowered youth to grow in mind, spirit, and body. Don't miss out. Join the fun and develop lifelong skills. Visit FirstShotTN.org today and register for the Winter Basketball League. That's FirstShotTN.org.
Good afternoon. Running slow down into that southern portion of Williamson County 65 southbound, where it connects with 840 down in the Spring Hill. It's also slow. 65 north, no surprise, right there at Rivergate Parkway. That's doing its thing up through there, trying to clear up a couple of wrecks. On 24, this one is 24 westbound off-ramp, or eastbound rather, there at Elmaville Road. That's got traffic a little bit slow on that off-ramp in Rutherford County 24 at Elmaville Road. When you need dependable towing for a car or truck, call STR Towing and Recovery. I'm Commander Chuck. You're on time traffic.
It's all sports talk from the Good Neighbor Network, FM 1019, 100.5, AM 1450, wgnsradio.com, and Big G TV.
Happy Hump Day, as Leland Stadium would say up in Nashville. Dylan Simmons with you on All Sports Talk on a cloudy and foggy Wednesday night. Going to be a cold Wednesday night as well. I heard the low could be 26 degrees tonight. So if you're going outside, might want to bring an extra layer or two. But again, as I said at the top of the show, it's a very joyful time for MTSU students. Graduation is around the corner. Finals are done. So there's a lot of excitement in the air. And there's not just excitement from MTSU and from the college sports world, but also from the high school sports world. I will say that the one bad setback to it being December and it being the holiday season is that high school football season has to come to an end because, man, oh man, if you ask me, and I'm sure if you ask a lot of other people, Friday Night Lights is a sensation. It is an honor to be a part of it every single year in some capacity, and it is awesome to watch every single year. So, gonna miss high school football for another season. But there was a big high school football state championship game you may have heard about down in Chattanooga, one of the local teams. You also may have heard of. Oakland Patriots were in that game. Class 6A state championship, of course, is what I was talking about. Oakland taking on Ravenwood in that game. We're going to recap a little bit of it right here on All Sports Talk. So if you didn't see this game, or maybe you just saw the score of it, this was an absolute domination by the Oakland Patriots, which, again, domination and Oakland are definitely terms that are kind of interconnected in the high school football sphere, at least as of late. We've seen all season just how great the potential is with this football team, but until you see it in action against an opponent of Ravenwood's caliber, it's really hard to truly grasp just how good a team is. Because there can be things said about, well, it may not be the same level of competition. How would they fare against the elite of the elite? Not to say Oakland hasn't played good teams. They certainly have played good teams all season. But against an opponent like Ravenwood, you'd expect that you'd really get tested and you'd really have to go to deep water. But the thing about Oakland is they made it look easy in this game. Ravenwood and Oakland were both undefeated football teams, and Ravenwood had 2 D1 quarterback commits, which is the first time that's happened, I think, in the entire nation in 5 years, give or take. It's definitely the only duo like that in the country this season, and they have a heck of an offensive rhythm. You're talking about Maverick Chance, Femi Babalola, 2 guys that I actually got to see in person myself. For those who don't know, I also call football and basketball for the Rooster 101.5. That's for Shelbyville Central, the Golden Eagles. Shelbyville took on Ravenwood earlier this year, and I was just so impressed with the rhythm of Chance and Babalola and the way they were able to flip-flop in and out and it not affect the team's primary goal and the way that the offense worked. So it was really impressive to see how they were able to manage that, and it's really hard to defend against that because if one guy's not on, then the other guy may very well be on. So you got to give credit to the Oakland defense for holding Ravenwood to only 21 points. That's right, only 21. Doesn't seem as though that's, in a game like this, 21's like, well, it could be a decent amount of points, but it really wasn't compared to what Oakland was able to do. I'll just go ahead and tell you the score if you haven't heard already. 63-21 was the final score. So, yeah, I said something about domination earlier. It was domination from the Oakland Patriots. Now, the funny thing that a lot of people are going to forget about this and the context of this game is that these two teams had faced off a couple years ago, and it was actually Ravenwood that broke a 21-game winning streak for Oakland. So, there are players for the Patriots who played in that game, who played against Ravenwood a couple years back, and I'm sure they remembered that. And I'm sure they were thinking, well, man, we'd like to get some revenge and, kind of show, hey, we didn't appreciate you ending our winning streak a couple years back. So I'm sure that added some extra motivation for Oakland in this game and for those players to go out and take care of business against a really, really high-level opponent. And I talked about Ravenwood's successes with their D1 commits, but I gotta say, there was another D1 commit on the football field among a few. His name was Craig Tutt, and he was in another world on Saturday. I mean it. He was like, what do they call Victor Wembanyama, the alien? Well, that's what Craig Tutt was. He was an alien in this game. I'm not entirely convinced that Pete Golding, the head coach of Ole Miss, isn't going to use him in the CFP this year before all is said and done, because my goodness, this guy just went off. It's one thing to have a great performance in any point of the season, and that is highly commendable no matter who the opponent is. But it's an entire other thing to do what Craig Tutt did in the state championship game, 226 rushing yards. Now, that on the surface is already really, really impressive. But just wait, there's more on the way. 7 rushing touchdowns. That was in a state championship game that Craig Tutt did that. It's almost unfair that he was able to pull something like that off. He tied a state record for rushing touchdowns in a state title game, by the way, by virtue of that performance. The only other running back, as far as I know, in 6A state history to do that was former Tennessee Volunteer running back Jalen Hurd, who, if you remember, I think it was back in 2012, did that for Beach High School. So it had been 13 years or so since that had been done, and who knows when we're going to see a performance like that again. Craig Tutt, a once-in-a-generation kind of talent, and you can see now why Ole Miss is really excited about this kid. He is going to be somebody that I think you'll want to keep an eye on when college football season comes around in 2026 next year. He could be a really big-time threat in the SEC, and of course for the Ole Miss Rebels. Now, it goes without saying, but Oakland is certainly a football dynasty, and I think a lot of people, this may not be an apt comparison in the eyes of some, but I think a lot of people would say they're an equivalent of Nick Saban in Alabama in the Tennessee high school football sphere. But if I may, I'd like to make another comparison. I think they're more along the lines of North Dakota State. And if you're familiar with FCS football, then you know North Dakota State is a team that wins championships year in and year out. When you've built your football program to a standard and to a point where there are years when you don't win the state championship, and that's a pretty big disappointment, that just shows you how high of a level of football you're playing. And that is the standard that Oakland has now. They've won back-to-back state championships, and they've won 5 of the last 6 state championships. So that kind of standard, that kind of ability, kind of speaks for itself. And I'm very curious to see who, if anybody in the future, is going to challenge Oakland. There are a lot of high-quality teams, not just in Rutherford County, but across the Middle Tennessee area, and really the entire state of Tennessee, that are going to be eager, I'd say, to try to unseat Oakland, because right now they're the benchmark. They're the team that everybody else is chasing, and, you talk about teams in Rutherford County like Blackman, you talk about other teams in the Middle Tennessee area, again, Ravenwood, maybe my team, Shelbyville Central, at some point that I call for, could be at that level. But right now, it's Oakland's time, and they're continuing to do some special stuff. And until further notice, they're the team that everyone else has to topple. So wanted to spotlight that state championship victory because it was very, very impressive and deserves a lot of applause and a lot of congratulations. So congratulations to Oakland on a second straight state title, and we'll see if they can make it 3 in a row and 6 out of 7 next year. Could be possible. In other news, this was, I think it came out just yesterday, as a matter of fact. This is coming out of the MTSU football department, and I've got a quote here from MTSU Sidelines. By the way, shout out to Brett Walker. He was on the show last week. This article came from him, so I'm going to quote his article for just a second. But MTSU head coach Derek Mason parting ways with offensive coordinator Bodie Reeder, according to a report. This was originally from John Bryce of footballscoops.com on Tuesday. So John Bryce, I believe, is the one who initially took this report. So as the article said from Brett, Bodie Reeder no longer the offensive coordinator for the MTSU Blue Raiders. They've officially parted ways. Now, I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but as everybody knows, especially all of our college football fans or MTSU football fans, anybody who's watched the game of college football for long enough, you understand that this is kind of part of the process. This is something that is going to happen inevitably. Every single year, there are staff changes, there are staff overhauls, there's hirings, there's firings, there's new coaches, there's old coaches. it's part of the game, and you've got to expect that that kind of change is inevitable. It's going to happen. And I think that the one thing that I've learned in my time as a college football fan of 22 years, give or take, is that there's only one thing that will always be constant, and that is change. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you're able to get a grasp on these many, changes in coaching staffs and what have you. Obviously, the Blue Raiders felt as though they needed to make a shift on their staff and felt like they needed a new vision on offense. That comes down to Coach Mason and his group ultimately to make that decision, and it's one that obviously they've gone ahead and chosen to make. So it's something that you have to, as a coaching staff and as a fan, understand that there is going to be a change here, but you have to, either way, no matter which way you feel about the decision, you have to keep an open mind and understand that this is part of the process, and MTSU is looking to try to bring that offense to the next level. And I think that's the main goal for Derek Mason and that coaching staff in general, is to see if they can get that offense to its next echelon, its next potential going into 2026. Coach Reeder obviously contributed to MTSU football in a big way, and the life of a college football coach, I think it's really important to remember this as well, folks. It's one of the most rigorous and challenging that you can find. You can argue that college football is harder to coach now than NFL football, because with the NFL, you don't have to be as much of a GM. You don't have to be as much of a recruiter. You get who you get, and you work with who you have. College football is a very multifaceted, multi-issue, I guess, for lack of a better term, sport, and you have a lot of different things you're trying to juggle. You're trying to juggle roster construction. You're trying to juggle recruiting. You're trying to juggle maybe going into a new coaching staff and a new team. I saw a tweet from John Summerall, the current head coach at Tulane, and I guess technically the head coach at Florida too. I don't know how exactly that works, but either way, I'll try to explain this as best as I can. He's currently coaching Tulane. He's going to be the head coach for Florida officially next year, but he's already been announced as the head coach. He let out a tweet talking about he was doing basically double duty. He's coaching Tulane while he's also assembling Florida's roster and getting staff in place for the Gators for next year. And I think that kind of highlights how tough it is being a college football coach. And an offensive coordinator, although they don't have the same responsibilities as a head coach, they have a lot of those same things that they have to keep track of, they have to keep an eye on. Whether it comes down to recruiting, whether it comes down to getting players, getting a quarterback maybe, getting a running back, a wide receiver, whoever, trying to convince players to come here, trying to get them to buy into this offensive system. It's a very, very asking and stressful job. So you got to give a shout out to all the people who decide to become college football coaches, because it is certainly not an easy thing to do, and you just got to wish Bodie the best in the future, because obviously he's a very talented guy, and he was, I know a lot of media reporters who got to talk to him, and obviously a lot of people are wishing him well. So we'll have to see how Bodie does in the future, wishing him the best. But we're going to have to wait and see as well who Coach Mason will bring in to be the new offensive coordinator. And he certainly has a lot of connections. Coach Mason has a lot of mileage when it comes to the college football world. I think he will be able to sell the job on the idea that we've got a really nice up-and-coming offense. We have a quarterback who's showing a lot of potential right now in Roman Gagliano, who's going to be around next year. We have a lot of quality pieces. I'd say they'll get more probably in the portal, probably some from recruiting. So this is a team that certainly is going to have a lot of talent and a lot of potential going into next season. And I think that an offensive coordinator, a prospective offensive coordinator looking for a position like that, I think that's certainly going to be a huge bargaining point for them, is that they're going to have all of that at their disposal, and they'll have the ingredients to make a really nice soup of offensive power. That may not be the most accurate analogy in the world, but you get what I'm saying, right? They're going to have the potential to make a really good offense, is what I'm trying to say. I do think that we're going to know the answer to this question sooner rather than later. This is just me speculating. I don't know anything for sure here. We may know but before the end of the week. In this age of college football, things turn over so fast and things change so quickly that you get staff changes and new guys into position really quickly. unless you're Penn State. By the way, they do have a head coach now, Matt Campbell. Shout out to the Nittany Lions. But all things considered, I think we'll know soon. But it is important for Coach Mason to take his time and figure out exactly who he wants to bring on and get the right guy for this position, because this is an absolutely crucial hire going into year 3 of Derek Mason's tenure. So excited to see who he'll bring in and how the team is going to look next year with a new offensive coordinator. And again, we wish the best for Bodie Reeder as he gets ready for the next stage of his career. We're not done, though. On the All Sports Talk Show on this Wednesday, we got a little bit more to come. Coming up in our next segment, we're going to be talking college football, specifically the college football playoff. It's the talk of the town right now. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got a thing they want to say, and you're going to hear my take on this year's college football playoff. Did the committee get it right? What's going on with the whole Notre Dame situation, and all sorts of other news from the world of college football. All that and more is coming up right after the break here on All Sports Talk.
Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home has served Murfreesboro families with compassion and care since 1880. As a family-owned funeral home, we're committed to honoring every life with dignity through traditional services, cremation options, and pre-planning that gives you peace of mind. For over 140 years, we've been here when it matters most. Visit JenningsandAyers.com. Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home, honoring life and comforting families since 1880.
You're listening to the flagship station for Blue Raider sports.
On 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Middle Tennessee!
Play up, man, score!
Middle Tennessee football, basketball, and baseball. Yeah, we got them.
You're listening to the flagship station for Blue Raider Athletics. I'm Chip Walters. Hear the games here on News Radio WGNS.
Middle Tennessee win! Raiders win the championship!
Your source for the Big Blue and the Borough. News Radio WGNS.
Sign-ups are going on right now for First Shot's Winter Basketball League in Rutherford County. Coach Andy Herzer guides kids to sharpen basketball skills and build teamwork through exciting clinics and games. Since 2003, First Shot has empowered youth to grow in mind, spirit, and body. Don't miss out. Join the fun and develop lifelong skills. Visit FirstShotTN.org today and register for the Winter Basketball League. That's FirstShotTN.org.
At State Farm, when home and auto work as a team, you score and save money. I'm State Farm agent Andy Wama. Give me a call at 615-890-0850 and let's work together to win big by saving money on home and auto. With the service you get from State Farm, you might think our car insurance costs more. I'm State Farm agent Andy Wama. Give me a call at 615-890-0850 and let me show you with discounts up to 40%. You may find it even costs less.
Next on All Sports Talk, it's the Blue Raider Insider Report with Chip Walters of Exit Realty, Bob Lamb & Associates.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and let's start with Blue Raider men's tennis. Senior Kareem Al-Amin has been recognized as the Conference USA Athlete of the Month for November, according to a release from the conference office on Tuesday. Al-Amin capped off a strong fall season with standout performances at the 2025 ITA Masters Championships in San Diego and the NCAA Doubles Championships. At the ITA Masters, Al-Amin opened singles play with an impressive 6-4 win over Dayton's Mikkel Zender. In doubles, Al-Amin and partner Andre Horak put together an exceptional run. The Blue Raider duo defeated Texas Tech's team 7-5, 4-6, 10-8 on day 2, then followed a 6-3, 6-3 victory over Western Michigan's doubles team. They continued their momentum with a dominant 6-1, 6-3 win over Bucknell's doubles team, securing their spot in the upcoming NCAA Doubles Championship. So congratulations to Kareem Al-Amin, named the Conference USA Player of the Month. Looking at Conference USA men's basketball, last night just one game on the schedule. Actually on Monday night, no games last night. Kennesaw State defeated Southern Wesleyan 121-66. Coming up tonight, 3 interesting games. Liberty will be at NC State. That is on ACC Network Plus. Delaware at George Washington. and Western Kentucky will be at Marshall. Coming up on Friday, Missouri State will be at Xavier, and then on Saturday, Delaware will host CSUN, Cal State Northridge. New Mexico State will be at Tulsa. Louisiana Tech will host Louisiana Lafayette. Jacksonville State at Georgia State, and UTEP will be at Hawaii. In women's basketball, there was one game or two games last night. It was Louisiana Tech defeating Grambling 74-60, and Jacksonville State over Bruton Parker by a score of 60-35. Tonight, there is one game. George Washington will be at Delaware. They're in Newark. And then coming up on Saturday, Arkansas at Missouri State, Richmond at Liberty, Point University at Jacksonville State, UTEP at BYU, and Louisiana Tech at LSU. The Lady Raiders will play again on Sunday when they travel to Evansville to take on Southern Indiana. You can hear that game beginning at 2 o'clock Central Time. Pre-game show at 1:30 with Dick Palmer on the Blue Raider Network. Speaking of women's basketball, continuing to play well beyond her freshman status, Middle Tennessee guard Blair Bogus has been selected as the Conference USA Freshman of the Week, which marks Bogus's third CUSA Freshman of the Week honor. She is one of the most productive freshmen in the nation and opened the week with a dynamic performance against Belmont, recording 21 points, 3 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 assists while shooting an efficient 9 of 15 from the field. She followed that with a dominant effort in the win over Memphis, finishing with 19 points and a career-high 14 rebounds. She added 3 steals and an assist, shooting 5 of 10 from the floor and 9 of 12 at the line. Conference USA football bowl season coming up next. First bowl game involving Conference USA teams will be next Tuesday when Jacksonville State will play Troy at the Salute to Veterans Bowl in Montgomery, Alabama. Delaware will play Louisiana Lafayette on next Wednesday. That is in Mobile. Next Thursday, Missouri State will play Arkansas State in Frisco, Texas. Friday the 19th, Kennesaw State will face Western Michigan in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Tuesday the 23rd, Western Kentucky and Southern Miss in the New Orleans Bowl. Friday the 26th, FIU and UTSA in Dallas. And then on Tuesday, December 30th, Louisiana Tech will take on Coastal Carolina in Shreveport. That's it for today, folks. We'll have an update tomorrow right here on the Big G, WGNS.
It's all sports talk from the Good Neighbor Network, FM 1019, 100.5, AM 1450, wgnsradio.com, and Big G TV.
Welcome back inside the WGNS studio here in beautiful Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Dylan Simmons with you, your host on this Wednesday night. And a very jubilant Dylan Simmons, because the Miami Hurricanes fan in me was very excited, obviously, for the college football playoff selection show on Sunday. Let's just say I was pumped to see the Miami Hurricanes get that number 10 seed. Speaking of the college football playoff, I have in my hands the playoff bracket right here, so I'll go over a few of the matchups, and then we'll talk about whether or not the committee got it right, because there's been a lot of discussion about it, especially if you've been on social media as of late. So the number 1 overall seed, the Big Ten champion Indiana Hoosiers. Number 2, the Big Ten runner-up Ohio State Buckeyes. Third seeded Georgia, SEC champions, dominated Alabama in the SEC title game. Fourth seeded Texas Tech, the Big 12 champion, their first in a number of years. Fifth seeded team is Oregon. The Ducks will be hosting a playoff game in Autzen Stadium. Ole Miss is the 6th seed. Texas A&M in their first playoff as the 7th seed. Oklahoma in their first 12-team playoff as an 8th seed. And this is where the controversy really started to begin. Alabama, despite losing by 3 touchdowns to Georgia, stays as the 9 seed in the playoff bracket. And then, of course, my Hurricanes are the 10 seed. They'll be taking on Texas A&M in College Station. That will be coming up next Saturday, December the 20th. And then the final 2 seeds are Tulane from the American Conference champion, and James Madison, the first Sun Belt team to ever make the CFP. So it's a very interesting, very unique bracket this year. We've only got about 10 minutes or so to talk about all this, and I could go about this all day. But I do want to say, as far as did the committee get it right, I think they did. However, I think the way they did it may not have been the best way to go about it. And here's what I mean by that. I think the way that the committee signaled who was going to get in and who needed to get in was a little bit odd. So for weeks, Notre Dame was ranked in the playoff bracket. They were in the field. If the season had ended at that point, Notre Dame would have made it. Obviously, you all understand that. It is strange that all of a sudden they dropped below Alabama the week of the Iron Bowl, and then the very next week they dropped below Miami without having lost a game. It seems as though it's an odd thing to do, but I think the reason this had to happen was because of overreactions. I think the committee overranked Notre Dame early on, and they underranked Miami. They had them at, I think, 10 and 18 in the first rankings, which was too high for Notre Dame and too low for Miami, and that created a conundrum for them down the stretch. I think what the committee did is they assumed Miami was going to, kind of fall off a little bit after getting off to that 6-2 start. Lost a couple of games to Louisville and SMU. I think they assumed that the Canes were just going to be on a free fall, and then they won 4 games in a row. So all of a sudden, the committee was in a pickle because they assumed that Miami was going to lose. They, in fact, did not, and eventually they had to honor head-to-head, and they put them in ahead of Notre Dame, which is the right choice, but the question that I ask, and a lot of other people have been asking, is why was that not applied 2 or 3 weeks ago? Because then we could have avoided a lot of the drama and a lot of the heartache for a lot of the Notre Dame fans out there. So the committee did get it right. I also don't think you want to punish Alabama for playing in a conference championship game, especially if they're already in the bracket. To me, that's a little bit overly harsh, even if it was a big-time beatdown by the Georgia Bulldogs. Here's the thing, too. I doubt the SEC runner-up will ever be left out because they play in the conference championship game. I just don't see that happening. So the committee did get it right. They just went about it in a weird way that doesn't really make as much sense. So, I'll leave that up to you ultimately to decide, but that's my take on how the committee got this one done. Now, as far as the Notre Dame situation, I have to be careful with what I say here because I am a Hurricanes fan, so I'm a little bit biased, as all of you know. Obviously, Miami-Notre Dame, a big rivalry between those two, so I'll try to keep my feelings out of this. I understand the sentiment of frustration because, like I just said, you had been in the playoff field virtually for weeks. You were led to believe that, yeah, we're going to make the college football playoff considering what the committee has applied to us. Would you believe me if I told you that I think the night before the selection show, Notre Dame was at a 95% chance by most sports books to get in the playoff, and they somehow didn't make the playoff. So that just goes to show you that even Vegas was fooled ultimately by what the committee decided to do. So I do think the frustration from Notre Dame is that way. However, I do think the way that they continue to, or some of the arguments that they make are a little bit misguided, I think is the best way to put it. I don't think the attack on the ACC is the right way to do this because at the end of the day, the ACC has to advocate for a particular team. If Miami has a chance to go to the college football playoff, you're not going to not say anything about it because Notre Dame is a partner program. No, you're going to push for your ACC team, your conference institution that is part of the conference in football, to get in the playoff over somebody who's more of a, I guess, quote-unquote business partner. And apparently Notre Dame was not happy about that, and I just don't think that's an argument that needs to be made. If you wanted to reinforce the idea that the committee pulled the carpet out from underneath you, I could get on board with that. I think that's a solid way to go about it. That's a good argument to make, but they decided to not choose to make that their sole argument. Instead, they're going off in all these different directions, and it just doesn't really add up to me. So I do think Notre Dame is going about this the wrong way. I think there are a lot of better ways that they could be handling this, and I think that they have to be careful with how they're approaching this because if you do look at it a certain way, then it could come back to bite you later on if you say certain things, I guess is the best way I can put it. What I will say, though, is that we do now know there's a memorandum of understanding is what they call it. And starting next year, if Notre Dame is in the top 12 of this college football playoff, they will automatically make the field. So if this happens again next year, it won't be an issue for Notre Dame, but that's remains to be seen how all that's going to go down. And when you look at Notre Dame's schedule, they have a pretty solid shot at making it back to the playoff with the opponents that they've got in front of them. So it's a mess. I really dislike this part of college football because I like seeing, intense emotions and people really getting into the sport. But what I don't like is when the controversy overtakes the play on the field. At the end of the day, to me, the play on the field needs to take prerogative. And if it was up to me, there wouldn't be a need for a committee to decide who's in, who's out, which teams are the best, because you're asking a group of, whoever to make this decision. And they're very experienced in what they've done. They've had plenty of experience in the past when it comes to college football, but at the same time, you're asking human beings to decide who deserves a shot at playing for a national championship. To me, I would almost want to leave the committee out of it. Now, I'm not proposing a 16-team playoff because, honestly, I don't want to see the playoff field expanded any more than it already is. I think 12 is probably right where it needs to be. Here's how I would fix it, and this is a pretty simple fix, and this would have prevented a lot of the problems. First, the ACC has to fix their tiebreakers so that Duke doesn't make the ACC championship again. And secondly, instead of giving automatic spots to certain teams, how about we just do the top 12 teams in college football? How about we just do that? Because I think that's the most fair way to settle it. Top 12 teams in the rankings. If that was the case, then both Notre Dame and BYU would be in, and I think that may be a better way to settle it. So there's a lot of conversation about that. Will the playoff field get expanded? My guess is that it probably will to 16. This is going to be my assumption here. Whether that's going to be the AQ model or something else, I don't know. But I'd assume that's the way it's going to go. Keep your eyes open and always be watchful when it comes to college football because you never know which twists and turns it's going to take you on next. But either way, it's a heck of a ride to be on. And hopefully, if nothing else, hopefully your team got in the playoff or you've got somebody to root for. And if you don't, then, I'd recommend my Miami Hurricanes, but I am a little biased on that one. But either way, it's going to be a really fun college football playoff bracket. Again, you've got those playoff matchups coming up next week. And here on WGNS, we've got a lot of fun stuff coming up next week as well. Again, MTSU women's basketball on the road on Sunday against Southern Indiana, and then at home against Auburn on Tuesday night. And then the men's basketball team takes on Kennesaw State, their first Conference USA game of the season. All of those games will be right here on WGNS, so make sure you don't miss out on that. And we will be back next week with more of that all sports talk goodness. It'll be yours truly, Dylan Simmons, with you. Cannot wait to see you then. So for my producer, Jackson, and for all of you listening in, this is Dylan Simmons saying so long and have an electric night, everybody.
Are you paying too much for home and auto insurance? Let the experienced professionals at My Team Insurance in Murfreesboro help. With decades of experience, their team provides superior customer service, low rates, and a clear understanding of your coverage needs. Whether it's home, auto, health, business, or life insurance, My Team Insurance makes protection simple and affordable. Visit myteaminsurance.com today. That's myteaminsurance.com. My Team Insurance, proud supporters of the Blue Raiders.
This has been All Sports Talk on WGNS and Big G TV, where we hit every level of the game from the preps to MTSU across Tennessee and the nation. Thanks for tuning in to All Sports Talk from the Good Neighbor Network.